I considered at one point in time titling this, When Your Ally Becomes Your Enemy. The U.S., state, and local chambers, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we've taken out the when your ally becomes your enemy. That might be just a little too strong, but maybe not totally. In Oklahoma, the Democrat Party, that Democrat label has been so decimated that it really is inconsequential in the state of Oklahoma. They are in such a minority and have such little ability to affect the outcome of any elections. They're just not a player. So all the conflict in the state of Oklahoma is within the Republican Party. And those of you that have heard me before know that in my talk about how Oklahoma went from a deep, dark blue state to a bright red state in 20 years, that one of the ways that that happened is the fact that the chambers and the grassroots worked together to bring that about. But now we find about 30% of the agenda of the chamber is in conflict with good government and in conflict with the grassroots agenda. So while I agree with them perhaps 70% of the time, we really butt heads on the other 30% of it. I'm really not going to focus on the U.S. Chamber today other than to say this. The August 25th edition of the New American Magazine has this article in here called Does the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Equal Crony Capitalism? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce supposedly engages in political advocacy to help businesses prosper, but it would be more accurate to say that it helps some businesses prosper. And I would urge you to get a copy of this. We have some copies here today. I think they make them available for a donation of any amount, recommended $1. If you'd like a copy of this New American, just raise your hand and they'll bring one by and give it to you right now, and you can donate that later if you'd like that. There's several people here. I would urge you to read this. There's a couple here because it's a very, very valuable. I think what you're going to find, for the most part, I'm going to talk some about the Oklahoma situation with chambers, but they're not going to vary much, in my perspective, in Wisconsin or any other state, because you have the U.S. Chamber setting a certain agenda that influences your state chambers, which then influences your local chambers. And so what I'm going to share with you today may not be too different than some of the things that are going on here. You may just not know about it. And so please take this information today and begin to research and find out just how much of the same is going on. When it comes to the U.S. Chamber, they're really more about, of course, their number one agenda perhaps right now is forcing the Republicans to get on board with amnesty for illegal aliens. That's one of their big issues. Another one is to reinstitute or renew the charter for the Import-Export Bank. Another one is to promote future quote-unquote free trade agreements. They really aren't free trade at all. I'm a big advocate of free trade. What I'm not a big advocate of is highly controlled trade in the name of free trade, which is really more about political integration and creating regional supranational governments, such as the EU. And right now, President Obama is behind closed doors negotiating on 2 such free trade agreements right now. And I'm sorry to say, but probably most of the Republican members of Congress will be very supportive of those things unless you come to an understanding of those, just like we need to in Oklahoma, and we are working very diligently to try to bring our congressional delegation to a place where they're in opposition of these so-called free trade agreements, which will ultimately bring us into supranational regional government, and you will lose even more of your liberties than what we've lost right now. So I really urge you to get this magazine here. I want to start off by saying the State Chamber of Commerce in Oklahoma took an interesting, different tack about 5 years ago. Prior to that, all directors, executive directors of the State Chamber, had always been people from the business community or very good administrators. About 5 years ago, they tapped a former state lawmaker to be the executive director. This was a state House member that had been term limited out after 12 years, had run for Congress, came in fifth in a six-man race, was then hired by the Senate Minority Leader. Makes sense. Surprisingly, the Senate and House within the same party don't really communicate all that much. And so it would be very wise for the Senate Minority Leader, soon to become Senate President Pro Tem, to bring this House member on, well-connected House member, and to help further agenda. He worked there for a couple of years and then became executive director of the state chamber. In 2012, shortly after our legislative session, this executive director and their government relations person, which is a fancy name for high-powered lobbyist for the state chamber, their top lobbyist, let's put it that way, went to Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, to do a wrap-up on the session for the chambers in the Tulsa-Jenks, Broken Arrow area of the state. We had a member of OK Safe attend that and taped that meeting. And the outcome of that meeting has been very revealing. It is very clear, and I'm going to, rather than read you actual quotes, I'm going to paraphrase some things today for the sake of time. But the outcome of the meeting was an expression of how disappointed they were to help get a people elected, and then once elected, they weren't on board with the chamber's agenda. Therefore, they would be looking in the future for candidates that were like-minded, and those would be the candidates that they would help get elected to the state legislature. One of the quotes from this executive director, or the lobbyist there, was, "This ain't your granddaddy's state chamber. We're running chamber business out of one side of the shop, and we're recruiting and running campaigns out of the other side of the shop." So what we're seeing right now is, through hiring some very skilled, high-powered political consultants, the chambers are having these guys go out and find the candidates that they want. They're putting the money into those races, and we have a new enemy in the state of Oklahoma, in my estimation, and that is these candidates that are brought in by the state chamber to do their bidding and their agenda. Now, let me suggest to you again, I agree with about 70% of the agenda. The good is this: the chamber has helped us get right to work passed in Oklahoma. The chamber has helped us with tort reform. The chamber's helped us with workers' compensation reform. Now, entering our second year, our rates have decreased across the board 22% on workers' comp. Our injured workers are getting their medical needs taken care of quicker, and they're getting back to work faster. It's been a win-win situation all around. They helped us work on our retirement systems in Oklahoma to make those more solvent. We have 7 retirement systems. Our teachers' retirement was the second worst in the nation. In the last 4 years, we've gone from a $17 billion deficit in our retirement funds down to a $10 billion deficit. And that's without any kind of a tax increase. That's just by doing some things smart, like taking away the COLAs unless you can pay for a COLA. That was one of the things that was killing our retirement systems. We were giving cost of living raises without putting the money in there to meet those needs. So the state chamber's done some very, very good things. Here is my problem with your chambers. They do not believe in free market capitalism. They are much more akin to what I would call socialist capitalism, or even more so, fascist capitalism. If you do not understand the difference that I'm talking about, this 29-minute DVD called Overview of America will explain this thoroughly. You must understand the difference. Because in this article, as it says, we're not talking about free market capitalism in this article about the agenda of the U.S. Chamber. I'm not going to take the time to explain the difference there other than in some examples here today. The other beef with the state chamber in Oklahoma is the fact that they want Oklahoma to be seen by certain types of people around the nation as progressive, as in step. Therefore, they don't want any issues dealt with, such as homosexual marriage, Second Amendment issues, Sharia law issues, any social issues. They would prefer there not be any discussion of them at all. They're concerned that as we successfully passed a law to prohibit any foreign laws being used in our state, and of course that was aimed at Sharia law being used in our state, they are afraid that we will be seen by people in Chicago and New York and Boston and San Francisco, Houston, Miami, and places like that as being rednecks. The same with Second Amendment issues, homosexual issues, abortion issues. They don't want anything dealt with except for financial issues. That's the main concern that they have. And that's why about 4 years ago, we had a new speaker elected right after the November elections. We had a caucus up in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, of all the House members. And the Oklahoman, which is the largest newspaper in the state, had been about to run out of ink and paper with articles and editorials about the necessity to stay focused on the only thing that matters. And that only thing that matters are financial issues. We don't have time to deal with these social issues. So I organized a rally to go up, and this was early December. It was a cold night in Bartlesville. And we had a bus take people from Oklahoma City, had people from Tulsa and Bartlesville join us. We had about 85 people. And the reporter from the Tulsa World, I thought, did a really good job in helping us with the headline. It says, while the lawmakers are inside being wined and dined by the chamber types, the protesters, the grassroots were out, not protesters, but the grassroots were out in the cold, making their points. During that point in time, my contention was we have time for both. We care as much about free market and business issues as the chamber does, as long as we define those differences. But we also care about these other issues that make Oklahoma a family-friendly state, make Oklahoma a state that people will want to live in because of low crime, strong families, and such as that. So when we got off the bus, I actually was wearing a Santa Claus costume. And the way the reporter couched it in the Tulsa World is when this Santa Claus got off with the bus with a picket sign in one hand and a bullhorn in another, he was not bearing gifts. He had a list, writing down who was naughty and who was nice. When the article came out and they interviewed me after our talks and things out front, they asked me if the chamber was our enemy. And I said our enemy is too strong of a word on that. Because when they're right, we'll lock arms with them and we'll work with them and we'll do the right thing. It's when they're wrong that we're going to oppose them and we're going to fight them. I hope you keep that understanding in mind. That's the good thing. They do some good. So I don't want to lambast them too strongly in that aspect. But now let's talk about some of the other problems. A number of years ago, I had a spokesman come and talk to us about a new program in Oklahoma called the Prosperity Project. Little did I know at that time, but that was the beginnings of the state chamber's attempt to take over state government. And I believe that that's what they want, total control of state government in the state of Oklahoma. The Prosperity Project was sold like this. Businessmen, many of your employees just don't know who to vote for or how to vote. They're going to follow somebody's lead, so why not follow your lead? And therefore, you can put out a document that will be nonpartisan, and this document will be something that we create, and it's called here the Reid Report. And the Reid Report is something that after every session and before every vote, They run full-page ads in the Oklahoman and the Tulsa World with a scorecard on all of your lawmakers. Now, obviously, you're supposed to be a good lawmaker if your score is high, and a bad lawmaker if your score is low. And I would say if you're in that 10 to 20 range, you probably are a bad lawmaker. Just like if you're in that 95 to 100 range, you're probably a bad lawmaker. The best place to be is in about that 55 to 65% range. That's what a good lawmaker is in my estimation. The problem is this is completely arbitrary and capricious. For example, one state lawmaker that did not score very well went to them and asked them to explain to him what the standard was used to grade him on. Turned out there were 83 votes. He voted right 78% of the time, and he had a score of 55. Well, how can this be? And he went deeper. And by the way, if you go to their website, they will never show you the votes that were used to determine this. As he explained, he actually voted the same way the Speaker of the House did on a crucial item, but he was knocked down on his score for the vote, whereas the Speaker of the House had a positive score for the vote. And he asked them why. And he said, well, we take other things into consideration, attitude and other things like that. Are you beginning to see capricious and arbitrary here? Another thing that was interesting a couple of years ago was up at the Capitol, close to the end of the session. We have a boondoggle in Oklahoma called the American Indian Cultural Center. It was supposed to originally be about a $110 million development in our kind of downtown Bricktown area, just 3 miles from our brand new historical society, which prominently features American Indians as part of the history of Oklahoma, as it should. But we want a Smithsonian-style museum for this, Heritage Center. And so the project started off, supposed to be $110 million. We've got about $90 million in it now. The state has borrowed $67 million to get it to the place it is, and it needs now another $80 million to finish. And we have been able to stop them for the last 3 years. What they've done is gone out and they've got some people in the private sector pledging to give $40 million if the state will borrow another $40 million to put in it, or come up with it any way they can. So here is 2 years ago, I'm down at the legislature the last week of session, full court press on coming up with this $40 million. And here a senator hands this to me. It had been given to him that morning. It basically comes from the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce saying that if you don't vote for this, you'll be docked 15 points off of your Reid report. You have some people there are scared to death to score low on the Reid report because the chamber has the money to run full-page ads. We look at the Oklahoma Constitution's conservative index. That now in its 35th year. It's the only thing in the state of Oklahoma that accurately ranks our state lawmakers on a conservative and liberal basis. All 10 of the questions each year are published that ranking is based upon. All Republicans have an opportunity to influence that ranking, not only in suggestion of bills, but also in debate, whether bills actually clearly reflect a conservative or a liberal bias. So we don't have the funds. The grassroots never has the $8,000 it takes to run this in the Oklahoman, and probably a similar amount of money in the Tulsa World. So there again, the money talks so loudly in that situation. And in fact, in our work together with the chamber to bring a Republican majority, now when we butt heads, the Republican majority is faced with this conflict. Do we go with the money or do we go with the grassroots? Which do you think there's a tendency to want to do? Particularly as the chamber is electing more and more people. Another little problem that came up for them is the fact that sometimes some of the agenda that they're able to get passed is struck down in the courts. So they decided to come up with a judicial rating system. You see, all of our appellate courts are on a judicial retention ballot. not every justice every year, but some from our 3 appellate courts are on this judicial. So they've come up, and State Representative John Bennett blew the whistle on this. They were trying to do this quietly. He blows the whistle on this, and what he does is names the people that the state chamber has picked to sit on this committee that will determine who the good judges and the bad judges are based upon business criteria only. The problem is some of these people on the committee represent businesses that have to stand in front of the courts. I think that's somewhat of a conflict of interest, in my opinion, a little bit anyway. Then we get down to a situation where this year Oklahoma probably passed the strongest Common Core repealer bill in the nation. Not only does it truly stop Common Core in at least 2 of the 4 areas, but we have also adopted a process. We go back to our old past standards for 2 years while we develop new standards. And if the new standards are not acceptable, then our state legislature has veto power over what the citizens and the educrats create in the new standards. So also a review to make sure testing is different. So it's a very strong repealer bill. It passed with very strong majorities in both the House and the Senate. We get to when session is out, our governor has 10 or 15 days to either sign or veto a bill, or if you do nothing, then it's a pocket veto, what's called a pocket veto. So what the chamber is doing is running full-page ads not only in the Oklahoman, but full-page ads in the Tulsa World and many of the other larger newspapers, urging people to contact your state rep, to contact the governor to veto Common Core. She did not. She signed the bill, the repeal bill, to repeal Common Core. It was also a little bit difficult for her because at the time she was the sitting president of the National Governors Association, the front group that was supposed to be where Common Core actually came from. And so she was caught between a difficult position. But the grassroots in Oklahoma had worked so hard and the movement was so strong that way. And in fact, she's facing an election this year that she had to go with the grassroots people, and she signed the Common Core bill. So those are some of the problems with the state. Now here's one reason I want you to understand that they're really not free market capitalists and why they're actually crony capitalists, or believe in crony capitalism. I want to show you an article, and I actually have some copies of these too if you would like to see them afterwards. Here's an article out of May 27, 2012 of the Oklahoman, and it's titled Bank of Oklahoma Subsidiary Focus of Tax Commission Audit. What happened, the Bank of Oklahoma is the largest bank in the state. Its CEO, major investor, has been the wealthiest person in the state for a long time. He's a big-time liberal Democrat, a bundler for Obama, an investor in Solandra, whatever that is, the energy firm out in California that went bust. And so anyway, in I believe it's 27, the Bank of Oklahoma purchases a venture capitalist business called Cottonwood Venture Capital Ventures, whatever it's called here. They purchased this, and we have a kickback program in Oklahoma, a tax credit. That's what tax credits are, kickbacks. We have a kickback program for venture capital companies that we will kick back 20% of what they invest. No requirement they create jobs. You'd hope they create jobs, but no real requirement they do that. So in 2008, they filed their income tax, this Cottonwood Valley Ventures, filed their income tax, and they reported $40 million in investments. So a kickback of 20% on that is $8 million, right back into the pockets of the owner here. That program was discontinued that year. In 2010, they amended their tax return. They said, oh, by the way, we forgot. When we said we did $40 million in investments, we forgot. We had another $800 million in investments. 20% of that is $160 million. Taxpayer money to be kicked back to them. Now, folks, I've never seen another article on this. I don't know what the resolution of this is. But there's no guarantee that this creates a single job here. As a matter of fact, this is an article out of the Tulsa Beacon newspaper, and it suggests Kaiser got $30 million in state tax credits. And this may have, and we don't know because these things, when they were created with such deep burial where no sunlight goes. Even state lawmakers, even the best nose for corruption in the state of Oklahoma, can't get to the bottom of this and really find out. But it's very possible that $30 million in tax credits went to the entity that invested in Solyndra. Wouldn't it be something if your taxpayer dollars in Wisconsin were being used to create jobs in another state? I would be rather upset about that if that's the case. This is not proof, it's just evidence. But if you want to see these articles, I have some of them up here. They're very much into making sure their buddies have the favored opportunity, the favored subsidies, the favored location, and stuff like that. Another problem with tax credits that we're facing in Oklahoma is our budgeting process. Because these tax credits are transferable in many cases. Meaning, if I didn't make any money in this one entity, I can sell this tax credit to somewhere else. And so other businesses will use it to lower their tax benefit. And we never know when they're going to do it. So you plan in your budget, and all of a sudden, if they pull the trigger, you could be off tens of millions of dollars in your budgeting just based upon when these companies, when these corporations want to do this. We have one state lawmaker that has been fighting for 5 or 6 years now to try to bring the light to this. But again, it's buried and covered in layers and layers and layers of protection over this potential corruption here. So it's a really difficult situation. I think probably I want to move to the local chambers at this point in time. Interesting thing, generally speaking, historically, your chambers of commerce are free will associations. They're private entities, and they operate off the dues of their members and whatever fundraisers, such as golf tournaments and things like that, that your chambers raise money. However, in more recent years, we're seeing a trend where they're beginning to receive a lot of tax dollars to use for chamber business. And I began to be alerted to this based on this article right here coming out of the Oklahoman on August of 2012. And it says attorneys for Shawnee accuse local chamber of misusing tax dollars. Here's basically what happened. The town of Shawnee had a hotel-motel tax. And I don't know if your communities have them here. It's each individual community determines if they're going to have one and what the amount is. And it will always be on top of your state and local sales tax. And sometimes in Oklahoma, our local sales tax, or state, maybe county and local, will be around 8.5%, something to that nature. And then you come in with another 6 or 7% hotel-motel tax. So if while you're traveling and you look at your bill and you see that you're being taxed at about 15, 16, 14, 17% for your hotel bill, then you'll understand here there's almost a double taxation. So what was going on in Shawnee was the city government was turning over all of their hotel-motel tax to the local chamber of commerce to promote the community. Well, what they did is they went out and bought a prime piece of land on Interstate 40 and one of the intersections in Shawnee. They bought this $500,000 piece of land. They put down put down $250,000, and they had a note for another $250,000. The problem is, when they bought the land, they didn't put it in the name of the city. They put it in the name of the Chamber of Commerce. And when the city found out they'd put it in the name of the chamber, they immediately ended their contract with them. The reason the local chamber sued the city is all of a sudden now they're on the hook, the chamber's on the hook, for the payments for this $250,000, and they don't have this revenue to make the payments. So they sued with this understanding. Give us some time. That's all we know. We recognize you have the right to end our relationship. Just don't do it immediately. Give us a little time to figure out another means to this. Well, reading between the lines is, give us some time to convince you of the error of your way so that we can go ahead and get this going again. So they ended up having a little work, and they decided to kiss and make up, and they started. However, there was one city councilman that wasn't buying it. So he started asking for all the imperative documents from not only the city, but also from the local chamber. And he found out that there was problems, so they're back in court again. Then they make up, and then they're back in court again. So who benefits from all of this? It's your attorneys, for the most part, that are benefiting from this. We just had a situation in July where the director of the Chamber of Commerce in Tahlequah suddenly had to resign, alleged embezzlement problems, and several other people also perhaps went down. And just this month, in my own community of Guthrie, Oklahoma, here is an interesting thing. It says, a contract between city and chamber reveals rift among top officials. I haven't been able to get to the bottom of it yet, but it is a lack of sunshine, a lack of accountability on the part of the chamber with the government funds. You see, if chambers operate on their own dues and money that's raised, then they're very careful to make sure that none of their members are treated poorly so that they won't resign the chamber. But once you start turning over government dollars to them, that's not their money, that's government dollars. And so all of a sudden they begin to have this different attitude, and they get grandiose in their ideas and programs and such as that. So that's, I believe, a real problem with your local chambers. One of the things that came out of that meeting back in Broken Arrow with the state director of the chamber, and another one is this quote I am going to read you, and this comes from the lobbyist there, and I'm going to read it to you exactly as it came off the recording. Quote, and for us, political guys, a lot of times the legislature spends a lot of time talking about things that just don't matter. I mean, they want to talk about tax cuts and all of that stuff. So we're going to have to figure out how to help refocus maybe the legislators' attention on things that are actually going to create jobs versus worrying about tax cuts and tax credits and stuff like that. Well, I would say $500 million a year in subsidies, whether that be upfront subsidies or tax credits, whatever, is not small peanuts for the state of Oklahoma, particularly when their budget is $7 billion a year. I'd say $500 million is not small change there. Probably more important than anything is the morality of the issue. I don't care what it is. I'm not a situational ethicist. Anytime government gives one businessman an advantage over another businessman, that is immoral, and that is wrong to do. The real way to have a free market economy that is stimulated is an understanding that businesses, corporations, consider tax as overhead. If you eliminate the overhead as much as possible, in other words, don't tax a corporation. And the reason for that is real simple. That's overhead, so they're going to raise the price of their goods or services. And the consumer is going to pay that anyway. The downside is you've now allowed government to hide part of the cost, the true cost of government. Secondly, and the most damaging, is the fact that it makes the goods and services you produce in your own state or community more expensive and less competitive on a national and an international marketplace. So the real way to stimulate an economy, and we all want a strong economy, just like you folks here in Wisconsin, the same with us in Oklahoma. We all want a strong economy. But rather than picking and choosing the winners and hindering the others and putting them into the loser category, let's reduce regulations as much as possible. And let's remove the overhead of taxation. That's the right way to do it. We have a difficult time in Oklahoma, and we have a good economy because of the oil and gas industry. But we have to compete with Texas right next to us. Texas has no corporate income tax. Texas has no personal income tax. Texas has no sales tax on groceries. We have all of the above. And we've reduced our personal income tax. We've reduced some of our franchise tax. But it's hard to compete with Texas when they have so much of a better business climate there. And Kansas, on the other side of us, is working toward eliminating their income tax, personal income tax. So if Oklahoma is not careful, we're going to be sandwiched between two states that have a better business environment than we do. I've noticed some of your political ads here, and I would be very interested to know how the voters in Wisconsin are ferreting out the difference between the lie and the truth in these political ads that are going on in the governor's race. Because it appears to me like someone's fibbing and someone's telling the truth, is what it appears to be me like. In concluding this, the chambers, up until this year, have been involved in open seat races. This year they took a different tack, and this is the ugly. They decided to go after some of our most conservative lawmakers in the state of Oklahoma. My lawmaker, State Representative Jason Murphy, not even arguably, measurably, is the most conservative lawmaker in the state of Oklahoma. After 8 years, he's the only lawmaker in the state with a perfect 100 lifetime average on the conservative index. You can ask any lawmaker out there who the most conservative is, and they'll tell you it's Jason Murphy. So they went to a candidate, and they offered a candidate $40,000 to $60,000 to run against Jason. He turned them down. They went to another candidate, another potential candidate, same offer. Turned them down, but said, I know another person you might contact. That person turned them down. They inquired about another person, and they were told this would not be a good candidate. Finally, a person did file against Jason. Now, I might mention one thing. Jason had $1,000 in the bank. He didn't draw an opponent 2 years ago. And unlike most candidates who try to raise the largest war chest possible to fend off and scare off a potential challenger, Jason knows that dollars for conservative grassroots candidates are scarce. So he didn't want to collect a bunch of those dollars 2 years ago when he didn't have an opponent. He will not allow a lobbyist to even buy him a cup of coffee. He will not accept money from any PAC or any lobbyist or a PAC that is controlled by a principal that has a lobbyist. He just will not take any of their money at all. He will not even allow them to buy a cup of coffee. And so they thought he was vulnerable on this. We're probably the only PAC he's ever taken money from because we are a general interest PAC and we have no lobbyist. Our members voted to support him. Our finance committee put $2,500 in his campaign. I sent out a fundraising letter on his behalf. He sent one out to his other people who supported him in the past. And almost overnight he raised $17,000, the most he's ever raised probably used 9 of it, and he beat his opponent, who did turn out to be the candidate of the state chamber. Beat him 84% to 16%. Another very conservative, top 5 conservative, was Paul Wesselhoff and more. I found out that he was being targeted. I called Paul, and Paul didn't even know it. Kind of scared Paul. Paul got to working very hard. A young man, 22-year-old young man, still living at home with his mom, going to school at Weatherford, about 75 miles west of Moore, Oklahoma. Filed. I called the young man up, talked with him, trying to find out what made him decide to run. Well, I'm a political science major, and I was thinking about running 2 years when he's term limited out, but I thought, why not just give it a shot now? Well, now, folks, you do know that 93% of the time incumbents win. So if I am his professor and he decides to run 2 years before it's an open seat against a very strong and popular elected official in his district, I'm giving the guy an F on his political science grade, is what I'm doing. Anyway, it turns out Paul got 78% of the vote, the kid got 22%. Another candidate that the chamber, a former lawmaker, decided to run again, a fellow named Kevin Calvey. Kevin had been out of the legislature for a few years, and there was an open seat in his district. He's got 4 years left that he can serve. He decided to run. When the chamber found out he was running, they called former Oklahoma County Republican Party chair in, and they offered him unlimited funds if he would run against Kevin. He's a friend of Kevin's. He said, no way. He left, and he went and immediately told Kevin what was going on. By the way, back to the Paul Wesselhoff. They went to another candidate first who would have been a very strong challenger and a very good guy. They went to him and offered him $90,000 to $120,000. So what the chamber is not only doing, and they weren't successful, Kevin won in a 4-way primary, won with like 55% of the vote. But it's not just the fact that they tried to take out some of the best and the most conservative lawmakers in the state. It's also a warning shot across the bow. We have an agenda. If you don't walk in our agenda, we're coming after you. Because we have the power, we have the wealth, we have the strength, we have the best consultants in the state that are in our stable. That's my opinion anyway. And we're coming after you. So do you understand now why I consider your state chamber to be perhaps our real enemy now, with the decimation of the Democrat Party? And it's really over 2 things. Are we going to have free market capitalism, or is it going to be fascist/socialist capitalism that's going to power us? And that's why I am trying to give this. I have been giving this speech all over the state of Oklahoma, and why I want to share it with you, because I hope you realize that those that may be your allies today may have some hidden agendas for tomorrow, should your state gain more and more strength within the Republican Party. I think that's a good thing. A part of my talks that I have given on the changeover from a deep dark blue state to a red state is the benefits with the Republicans in control, and the benefits are pretty significant. But most of those things that needed to be changed pretty well have taken place. We got a few more things, but a lot of the changes have already occurred in Oklahoma to make it a better state. Now the question will be, what kind of a real state will we be going forward? Will we actually live up to that expected or proposed concept that we're the reddest of all red states, whatever that means? I care about whether or not we're a constitutional state, whether we honor the principles of good government and a free enterprise. Thank you very much. I hope I'm not wearing my welcome out. This is my 3rd time in 2 years, and I appreciate you folks coming to hear this. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those. Yes, ma'am.
One thing you got to realize in this state is much different in your state.
Yes.
Because, boy, most of the ones that have parasites or whatever that sit on their butts, they're over 50%. And the working people, there's only maybe 40-some% that are carrying the rest of them. So
Yeah.
it's going to be very tough in this state.
Yeah, we're as far as decimating the more liberal party, you're behind us there in that. But I'm just telling you, you take care of one problem, and there may be other problems that you have to deal with after that. So, any other questions? Yes, sir. And Bill, was I supposed to turn this off now? Okay. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
We've got, I'll stand up here, I guess, but we've got about 3 things that are coming in Appleton right now, and it's like the Underground Railroad. And I tell young people that want to be a candidate for state or for federal, start in your hometown. The corruption is right there, and it doesn't stop from the top down. Now we're looking at a library, we're looking at an exposition center. Half of the stuff is hidden agenda stuff. They're looking at a library, $42 million, and I've got evidence that they can remodel one for $17 million and make it the state of the art in the whole United States. The Chamber of Commerce down there invited him to a couple of my meetings. He said, I've talked it over with my members, I've decided I better not get involved. And it's that same thing, they're part of the government. And these hidden agendas, nobody wants to do anything about it. It's, the mayor gets contributions, and he appoints guys that contribute. So the whole thing is canned from the day you become mayor.
City government is a jurisdiction of government I absolutely can't stand. It is so difficult. Most generally, your mayor and your city councilman are elected to see how much federal and state dollars they can get for their city, and it's just a real different entity. It's maybe a speech for another time, but I'll just briefly say this. We've kind of done something interesting in the county in which I live. And this started probably 25, 28 years ago with no vision in mind, but it started by first voting out of existence our county planning commission. So now if you live in the county and you're not in a city, an incorporated city limits, you can do virtually anything you're big enough to do. If you want to build a home, there's only one permit, one inspection, and that's for your septic system. If you want to burn trash out in your yard or in your pasture, as I do, you can do it. There's no permit that you have to do. It's about the freest place in the state of Oklahoma that we can live. About 17, 18 years ago, we had a school bond coming up in the Guthrie schools. I thought it was particularly bad, so I organized an effort to fight this school bond, and it lost. In Oklahoma, fortunately, school bonds require a 60% supermajority. It lost pretty overwhelmingly. I think it lost with about 52% no vote, so it was a long ways off. Since that time, 7 of the last 9 school bonds have been defeated in Guthrie. And I've led organized efforts on 6 of those times that it's been defeated. 2 of them were money for all-day 4-year-old preschool. And there's some really good research to show basically this one thing with all early childhood education. And that is the children that are the beneficiaries of that. It's very helpful to them until about the 2nd grade. And from about the 2nd grade on, there is no measurable difference between children that had early childhood education and those that did not. The largest study that's ever been done on this issue even suggested, large in the numbers of children that were in the study, largest in the number of years that they were followed. It's even suggested that there may be more problems come about this, behavioral problems created by excessive amount of peer pressure or peer influence. And so defeated 2 of those for that reason there. Anyway, the new superintendent up there 2 years ago asked me to serve on the Long Range Planning Committee. So I did for a year. examined everything that we have, and the idea was, rather than have Charlie on the outside chunking concrete at us, let's bring him on the inside and make him a part of the solution of the problem. Try to shorten this down. When it came to the night of our final recommendations, I came out of the closet. I told the other members of the Long Range Planning Commission I had worked to defeat 6 of the 7 that had been lost over the last 17, 18 years. And told them I would not support this one. The only question is whether I oppose it or not. And I really tried to be helpful and urged them, whatever you do, keep the cost of it low. Well, we're going to be voting in November on one, and it's going to represent an 18% property tax hike. Okay? The last one was 33%. It got 78% no vote. Okay? Well, I am going to fight this one now because it's too much, and it was trickery the way that they tried to do it. But the point is this: we have 0 millage levy on our property taxes for our school district now. And on top of that, our county commissioner, our county assessor, which we helped to elect 4 years ago, in studying the law, realized that she had the sole authority to reduce the assessment ratio. And the assessment ratio in the state by Constitution has to be between 11 and 13%. We were at 12. It can only be raised by a vote of the people. But she had the sole authority to lower it. She pulled the trigger last December. We now have the lowest property tax anywhere in the state. We have taken our county sales tax from 2% down to 0.75%. And we just beat an attempt in Guthrie to raise their sales tax by 1%. We actually have the lowest taxed place in Oklahoma to live if you live in the Guthrie School District. We have the lowest taxed place with the greatest amount of liberty. It's just a little effort that came about over a number of years. Really no original vision to do that, but really a fairly small group of people working to accomplish that. Remember this: all real change throughout history is done by a small group of people. That's why Vladimir Lenin said that an organized minority can always rule over a disorganized majority. And it's an incredibly small number of people, not more than 15, that's been able to control these school bonds, help elect the right people to county commission seats. We were able also to sell our county-owned hospital, put it into private hands, prove the quality of health care when that happened, and it put $8 million in the hands of our county commissioners to benefit the citizens with better roads and other ways. So local government can be influenced, but the more you have an understanding of how things work, and the better you strategize and work to do that, the more you can make happen. David, is that it?
That is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.